You know, I've recently been playing a shitload of games that are a load of shit. I've subjected myself to the experience of navigating irritating, nonsensical stories that unfold because the plot needs to happen. I've played as abysmal characters whose personalities and talents accommodate to the situation at hand, and I have endured castrating gameplay that forces you to go through a series of often hyper-tutorialized actions to get the game shit done. But all of that, as unpleasant as it is, pales when compared to the utter disregard the developers of these games have had for how I wanted to play these games or who I wanted to be in their game worlds. And I have endured all of this because, well, I'm an idiot who should have known better. But in my defense, I'll say that all of these games had the RPG tag attached to their names as popular user-defined tags on their Steam and good old game pages. Now, let's take a moment to go over the definition of RPG. A role-playing game is a game in which players assume the roles of characters in a fictional setting. Players take responsibility for acting out these roles within a narrative, either through literal acting or through a process of structured decision-making regarding character development. Actions taken within many games succeed or fail according to a formal system of rules and guidelines. I admit the source from which I got this definition is not the most reputable of sources, but it seems to me like whoever wrote this particular concept nailed it. The article from which I got this citation goes on to mention that there are tabletop RPGs and computer RPGs. Some of the latter focus mostly on their single-player campaigns, while some others tend to put most of their eggs on the multiplayer basket. But regardless of which of the variants you'd like to refer to as the real deal, structured decision-making and actions that may succeed or fail stand out as genre-defining aspects of this form of entertainment. Further into the article, the author talks about the purpose of these games. Interactivity is the crucial difference between role-playing games and traditional fiction. Whereas a viewer of a television show is a passive observer, the player in a role-playing game makes choices that affect the story. Now, in games like Lost Eidolons, Redemption Reapers, or Voice of Cards The Beasts of Burden, you don't get to decide who you are going to be in the game's world. You don't get points to spend on attributes or skills when you level, and you don't get to make any decisions story-wise. Don't ask questions, just play game. So you know what? RPG my ass. And users who have tagged these vacuous, pretentious, superficial, cringy, and boring pieces of shit that completely fail at anything that has to do with role-playing as RPGs.
Wherever you are out there, fuck you too!
But Alex, those are all JRPGs. They are known for—
I don't fucking care which letter comes before the R, the P, and the G. Be it a C, or a J, or an A. When I pick a game that has RPG as one of its tags, I expect to be in the driver's seat of the experience in some capacity. If the story doesn't have branching paths that stem out of story-related decision nodes, I would at least like to have some freedom to take on the game's objectives however I wish, or different builds that translate into a different experience. And all of these games that I just mentioned, which are new games that came out in the last 2 years or so, shamelessly default on the genre's implicit promissory notes, which are choice and consequence and opportunity cost. Now, do you want me to tell you about a game that actually nailed all of this? Well, stay a while and listen. Welcome to Ye Olde Entertainment. My name is Alex, and as you know, it is my duty, my mission, my purpose in life to help you decide whether that game that you have been thumbing for so long is indeed the right game for you or not. And today we are going to be talking about Fallout.
This is where it all started. It's all thanks to this.
Not exactly, kid, but almost. Fallout was one of the first games that I ever played that truly made me feel like I was shaping the future of the game's world and its various communities with my decisions. It also allowed me to decide who and what I wanted to be in the game's world. And it made it abundantly clear that my strengths and weaknesses as a character would make some courses of action preferable to others throughout the game, and some others not even viable at all. And I am not here today to tell you about why the die-hard fans of the franchise consider this game to be the ultimate masterpiece of gaming, or why its detractors think it's an overrated title that is much too dated to appeal to anyone who has not played the game before, only to then make a case that the truth might lie somewhere in between, like I usually do. Now, this time I am here to tell you that Fallout is a masterpiece. And if you really like your computer RPGs, and if you are at least somewhat into post-apocalyptic themed games, you'll see that you have little choice but to agree with me on this one. Because if you don't like Fallout...
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
Nah, I'm just kidding, of course. But you know who are? GOG and Steam, for having the censored version only available for purchase in their stores. And of course, they conveniently forget to mention that the version they have for sale is the censored one. But we'll get around to that later, believe that. As you know, I rate games according to a system of categories that I think are relevant to the genre of the game at hand. And Fallout is a CRPG that takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting and features turn-based combat mechanics. And when it comes to those, character creation and character progression are up first. Far more experienced and knowledgeable people have made far better videos than I could ever make about this game. One such illustrious individual is the one who goes by the name of StratEdgy. And just in case you haven't watched his video on today's subject matter,
I'm betting on unlikely.
I strongly suggest that you pay him a visit. When you're done with mine, of course. I'll leave a link to it in the description section. But this is what he had to say about Fallout's character creation system.
The greatest character creation screen ever made.
You almost got it right there. You were so close. But nah, Arcanum's character creation system was still better. But hey, don't get me wrong, this character creation system is
amazing.
And here's why. Fallout's gameplay mix consists of combat, exploration, questing, and what I like to call seamless puzzle solving. And the way in which you go on about all these things greatly depends on who you are in the game's world and the skills and talents you decide to cultivate. And this translates into a unique gaming experience every time you play. And the way in which attributes impact your experience in the game is a very good example. Let's take a look at the perception attribute for a moment here. Perception is an attribute that has an impact on combat, exploration, and questing. It affects your range with firearms and a stat called sequence, which is more or less like your initiative. It determines the likelihood of you getting to go first in combat, and it even gives you the chance to get more than one round of attacks per turn. But it also gives a little boost to your doctor, first aid, lockpicking, and trap disarming skills when you create your character. And all of these things are useful for exploration purposes, non-combat situations more like. And last but not least, it unlocks dialogue choices during conversations because it gives you amazing powers of observation. And if you have a good enough level of perception, you can pick up the empathy perk, which is perfect for TikTok users. This perk allows you to predict the outcome of every dialogue option, just in case you have not been paying any attention to the conversation. Strength, for example, has a huge impact on your finances. I believe you can imagine why. And then there is luck. You would think that an attribute like luck would only have an impact on the likelihood of you landing shots or evading incoming attacks. And you'd be wrong. Traveling the Wasteland can be a dangerous occupation, or a very profitable one depending on how much luck you have. Finding a wrecked truck with thousands of bottle caps for you to loot, or a giant dinosaur footprint at the center of which there's a corpse that you can loot a stealth boy from, and yes, hopefully the irony doesn't escape you. These are things that may happen because you decided to allocate a couple of extra points or 3 to your luck attribute. It also has a multiplier effect on everything in this game, a multiplier effect that works in your favor, of course, because under the hood of almost every aspect of Fallout's gameplay, there's an intricate RNG mechanic at work. So your character's build and the decisions you take story-wise, and note that these also depend on stats like intellect and charisma and speech skill checks. They translate into a unique experience every time you play the game. Let's take a look at an example of how this works.
Minor spoilers coming your way.
At some point in the game, you may choose to help the local ghoul population by fixing their water pump, in exchange for the water chip your vault so desperately needs. And that decision of course has far-reaching implications, but let's say you decide to help the ghouls. If you do, you'll have to get through Harry, this nasty super mutant who guards the entrance to the building where the water pump is located. Now, if you have decided to cultivate the art of speech up until that point, and if you have decent intelligence and charisma, you may convince the guy that you are not human, but a different variant of super mutant or a robot or whatnot, and that he must absolutely let you pass. But if you are more the sneaky type, you can always cross-dress,
I got news for you.
go into sneak mode and bypass the encounter altogether. But if you don't have any of these skills, or if you think you can take on these guys by more traditional video game means, then you'll have to take a crack at it old school style. And my guess is that you're going to be in for a world of pain if you do. But hey, it's on the table. See, there is one big decision here for you to make, and that is help or not help the ghouls. And this decision depends on a dialogue choice that you get during your conversation with the leader of the ghoul pacifist faction, and whether or not you walk the talk later with your actions, which you may choose not to do if you're a lying scoundrel. And this is a very Fallout thing, a trademark of the series even. You can change your mind about helping anyone and doing anything at any point during the game. But if you truly commit to helping the ghouls with their problem, you have 3 different big approaches that may or may not be viable to your character depending on the skills you have chosen to favor throughout the game. But even these 3 basic approaches branch into smaller courses of action. If you choose to engage the super mutants in combat, for example, depending on how far into the game you are and the weapons you have picked up along the way, you may choose to blow the dudes to hell and gone with heavy weapons, or hit and cheese it with small weapons, or even duke it out on a bare-knuckle mano-a-mano. But if you are feeling really creative, there's nothing stopping you from creeping up behind the mutant, planting dynamite in his pocket, and detonating the bastard's ass to mutant hell and gone from a safe distance. You'll need to have great sneak and steal talents in order to do this, of course, but the feeling of satisfaction you'll get from doing this
It's too damn hot.
and this beautiful array of possibilities depends on who you are in the world of Fallout. And the character creation and progression system is where all the magic happens. And as you watch that final succession of stills at the end of the game and hear the narration of what became of the world because of your actions, it is impossible not to revisit the decisions you made throughout the game, including the ones you made when you created your character and every time you leveled, and think about how things would have turned out if you had done this or that. Fallout allows you to create your character from scratch however you wish, but it also presents you with 3 different available pre-made characters, each with their own background. But even if you choose to be, say, Albert, you can still tailor the dude to your liking as much as you want. And you know what? I actually recommend that you choose one of those pre-made characters at least for one of your playthroughs, because these backstories are actually interesting, and they are easy to use as a template for the role-playing aspect of the game, which is absolutely phenomenal in Fallout. This is how Albert is described in his personal bio sheet. Albert is a charismatic leader of a small vocal minority of the Vault population that is considering life on the outside world. Dedicated to the role of a negotiator, he is often able to communicate efficiently between different parties. His professed occupation is closest to what was once known as a lawyer. Albert is often able to convince others that his ideas are correct. I admit this guy is a man after my own heart, man. If this doesn't get your role-playing juices flowing, I don't know what will. But the best part about this is that all throughout the game, with rock-solid consistency in every conversation you have with every NPC, you are given at least one dialogue choice that absolutely represents what someone like Albert would say in that situation. Even the final encounter of the game can be approached in a way that is uniquely Albertian, so to speak. You also have beautiful pearls of opportunity cost that come in the form of perks. These add substantial bonuses that come with very hefty penalties. And I am talking about something along the lines of, you get a girlfriend, and she's smart, ambitious, caring, has a great sense of humor, and is smoking hot. But she has a penis, and it's bigger than yours.
And I got news for you.
You see, that's gonna be a problem.
But if you know what you are doing and where you want to go with your character, some of them may even turn out to be OP. Other character creation systems, like the one in Underrail and most especially the one in Arcanum, have added their own twists, turns, and bits of flavor to the Fallout character creation formula. But make no mistake about it, this is where all those games got their best ideas from.
This is where it all started. It's all thanks to this.
Again, not exactly, kid, but close enough. The thing is that Fallout is awesome in no small part because of its amazing character creation and leveling system. Gameplay. Gameplay in Fallout is your usual mix of combat, exploration, and questing, but in this role-playing game, you actually do some role-playing.
No way!
Yes, you can play the role of the uncommitted, cocky asshole who is mean to everyone because that's just who he or she is. You can be Albert and always try to sweet-talk your way to the back of the kitchen, even when you are talking to complete assholes, or you can be the brutish simpleton who wants to smash things. And the game has paved all those avenues thoroughly for you to travel them if you so wish to. And it also has what I like to call seamless puzzle solving, because I don't know how the fuck else to call it. In this game, you don't have puzzles in the traditional and often irritating sense. You don't have to figure out how to move X number of boulders, or the right order in which to press Y number of tiles, or pull Z number of levers to open some bullshit door that you can't lockpick. Puzzles in this game are more akin to those you had in those text-parsing adventure games from the 80s, like Leisure Suit Larry or King's Quest. You know how it is. You look around, find a remote control, go to the pimp's room, you use the remote control to turn on the TV, and then you change channels until you get the right show that catches the pimp's attention and makes him move out of the way, so that you can then go to the second floor and have sex with a hooker. Ah yes, these games were my education in the 80s. They were a positive influence, I shit you not. They encouraged creative thinking, and they honed my problem-solving skills. And that's why I was able to figure out how to go to the second floor in Vault 15, how to disable those pesky energy barriers at the Mariposa military complex, and how to repair the water pump, amongst many other things. And this brand of problem-solving, which requires you to figure out not only what to do, but how to do it, is something that you don't see in games anymore. And I, for one, found this sort of Sierra-like problem-solving to be deeply rewarding. And sometimes the game would even throw a few experience points your way as an actual reward for figuring things out, and I loved it. Fallout also features questing, of course. And these quests also require you to pay attention to what you are doing at all times. And I think that's the most precious ingredient of Fallout's secret immersion formula. Because if there is one thing the original Fallout absolutely nailed, is the immersion aspect of the game. In Fallout, you have to keep your wits about you and pay attention to what everyone is saying at all times, because there aren't any quest markers whatsoever, which I 1000% approve of. And not everything you do is marked as a journal entry, and the journal entries that you do get look like this. That's right, there's no information about the wheres or the hows, and this is a good thing, because you were paying attention to every conversation. You didn't have your nose buried in your cell phone, did you? So yes, you have to remember the names of those you have to talk to, or help, or kill. You have to remember the directions that people give you and make sure you're going to the right place. And most importantly, you'd do well to pay attention to the potential consequences of your actions. I generally say that quests in a video game are only as good as the writing of the game itself, and the story in Fallout is rather simple, and it is kind of pushed forward clumsily from time to time, but the game manages to make you feel like someone who is trying to find his way by talking to strangers, figuring out obscure shit, engaging in quid pro quo dynamics with the NPCs, and from time to time, playing someone else's game. Every quest in this game feels like it's part of something bigger. I always felt like I was playing a part in something that was important in the grand scheme of things, but sometimes I felt like I was being kept purposefully in the dark about the details. And oftentimes I felt like I really didn't want to know the details because I was much too focused on trying to help my vault, and it seemed like knowing the details of what I was doing would work against my goals rather than aid them. I also like that there is valuable information for you to collect that requires you to go well out of your way to explore the most remote buildings in a city, and may even require you to have a high level of this or that skill to access the person or document that holds this information. And oftentimes, this isn't even a mandatory step in a quest. You just do it because it's going to be useful for you to figure out how to overcome some of the game's challenges. And as a bonus, you may even get nice chunks of lore that add further context to your mission and the state of the world. For example, talking to the ghoul-like mutant who goes by the name of Harold isn't mandatory to progress into the game's critical path. It also doesn't yield any experience, but he has valuable information on how to find and defeat one of the most dangerous enemies in the game. So if you go out of your way to find him, and if you have decent enough intellect and speech skill to get him to talk, you'll get information that'll make it substantially easier for you to kill these things. You won't be getting experience or money or items by talking to Harold. This encounter is also not mandatory to advance any quest, like we said, but this is a conversation you definitely want to have. He's also a crucial character in Fallout lore, whose personal history is deeply intertwined with a big threat that looms in the horizon, and he's not unwilling to tell you all about it. And we definitely need more conversations like this in video games these days. We need information to be a valuable tool that helps you get shit done in a game, and not just a milestone to conquer to unlock the next step of a quest, or to gain X amount of experience points or this or that item. Fallout also features a large map that you may explore at your leisure, but if you have no idea where to go, well, then your vault's days are numbered, I tell you. And that's why you need to talk to people to get a clue about where to go next. But if you go out of your way a little, you can also stumble upon interesting places. And some of these places may even have valuable information, loot, and even quests for you to do. To me, this has always been one of the IP staples, whether it takes place in maps with locations like the ones you get in Fallout and Fallout 2, or in an open world like the one in Fallout New Vegas. There are locations to be discovered in these games, and they are filled with things that add to the game's primary focus, which is choice and consequence. Fallout also features combat, of course, and I feel like this is the aspect of the game that might give the most trouble to newcomers to the title, and newcomers to the world, which in my book are people who were born in the 90s and later. And you might be thinking, please dude, I was also a newcomer to Baldur's Gate. I played it for the first time only 2 years ago, and I mastered its combat within 2 hours of playing the game. Well, congratulations, I suppose, but trust me, that is a very different beast. Because though Baldur's Gate has been around for almost as long as Fallout, its combat more or less set the standards for real-time with pause combat in isometric CRPGs. It's like picking up Street Fighter 2 for the first time when you have been playing games like Street Fighter 5 or Marvel vs. Capcom Infinity or whatever that shit was called. You can easily trace back the combat in those games to the original Street Fighter 2. But don't expect your experience with Encased or any of the latest Shadowrun games or even Wasteland 3 to ease you up to the combat in Fallout. The combat in those games was more or less modeled after the combat system in XCOM, and I think that's the best combat system for turn-based combat with fire weapons. But Fallout is more or less its own thing. You could say that Underrail or Atom RPG offer a comparable experience, but even if you have mastered these games, Fallout may still have a bit of a steep learning curve to you. Your agility attribute determines how many action points you have, and moving around and using your weapons takes action points, and then each weapon has different weapon mods. Some machine guns, for example, can fire single shots, bursts, or, for an extra action point, and if you call now, you may target a specific body part. Line of fire is also a thing in this game, and you can use it to your advantage, but your buddies aren't exactly the sharpest tools in the shed, so expect friendly fire to be an issue for your party too from time to time. Combat in Fallout is less about the tactics you employ during combat encounters and more about your character's build. You don't have cover systems, talents that trigger on the enemy's turn like the Overwatch talent in RTS games, or attacks of opportunity, but you have a wide array of weapons, different weapon mods, combat skills that improve your efficiency with the different types of weapons available in the game, some perks that improve your hand-to-hand combat capability, some other perks that improve your efficiency with this or that type of firearm, strength penalties for heavier weapons, different action point costs depending on the type of weapon, and a very complex set of rules to determine the effect of critical hits in the game. So you more or less win fights Solarian style.
The Solarians like their wars won before they start.
I prefer when combat depends more on how you handle the fight itself than on your build, but the way in which combat works in Fallout fits the game's philosophy like a glove. And if I'm honest with you, after so many years and so many turn-based games, I still had a blast, see what I did there, with the combat in Fallout. But the fun factor in Fallout's gameplay mix does not lie in how well individual aspects like combat or exploration work, but rather in how all of these aspects come together into one solid, cohesive whole that nails two things: choice and consequence, and immersion. It's hard to think of games that have achieved this combination so well in the RPG ballpark, and that alone is priceless to me. Story and lore. A post-apocalyptic world is one in which resources are scarce, people take justice into their own hands because states have ceased to exist and there are no formal authorities to turn to, and individuals have either become the worst or best versions of themselves. Yes, if you want to know the quality of someone, just put him or her in a fucked up scenario and you'll have your answer. People turning to messianic leadership and quasi-divine solutions, compromising values that were once thought to be non-negotiable because survival is at stake, and living every day as though it were the last, are also parts of the post-apocalyptic equation. And Fallout nails all of this. And it's in every tiny piece of lore around you, from the very currency that's used in the Wasteland, to its caravan-dependent trade, to the emergence of opportunist mafia-like organizations and other factions who are convinced that theirs is the true and only way to overcome the post-war crisis. Now, the story in Fallout all by itself is like nachos. Decent nachos. Crunchy, salty, tasty. Some of them are broken, so okay, nothing to write home about all by themselves. But the secret is to dip these motherfuckers into that tiny maelstrom of flavor we call classic chili to get the full power of the experience. And in Fallout, that bowl is the game's lore. In my opinion, no other lore in the realm of video games is as deep and intricate as the lore in this IP. In this respect, the original Fallout is absolutely brilliant in its design. You get the gist of things by talking to NPCs. You know, the most basic answers to your most basic questions, like, where do I have to go? What do I have to do? Who do I have to talk to next? But the things that you see and hear and the people you meet in the world of Fallout will inevitably raise questions about the world around you, like, why do I live in a vault? What was the purpose of these vaults? Were they built because the world knew a huge war that could potentially annihilate everything was coming? And wait a minute, how is it that there are cities and towns out there where there's people living and engaging in stuff like trade and agriculture? Cities and towns where there are casinos, shops, and a bunch of other stuff? Why are Vault citizens completely isolated from these cities? And why are we all wearing uniforms? Wait a minute, this guy Harry told me that he was ordered to take the normals to the loo, and he was definitely referring to humans. Huh, interesting, then why is he letting these guys be? Wait a minute, aren't these guys children of the cathedral? What are they doing here? And why were they not taken to loo? And many of these questions get an answer over the course of the game, and sometimes they are more than you bargained for. And if you are a conspiracy theorist, you are going to have a field day with this game, especially if you read the Fallout Bible. But trust me, you want to read this even if you're not a conspiracy theorist. It was written by, you know, some guy called Chris Avalon. Yeah, only the best writer ever in the realm of video games. This was a series of volumes that are no longer considered to be canon because Bethesda now owns the property. Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, I'll give you a tiny example of why you should read the Fallout Bible.
Minor spoilers coming your way.
So you have to go to Vault 12, because apparently this is where you'll finally be able to acquire the water chip that your vault so desperately needs. And it turns out that Vault 12 is underneath a city called Necropolis. Formerly Bakersfield, it seems, a place that sentient ghouls have come to call home. But why are there these many ghouls living here? Did the ghouls come here because they found out there was a vault with a functioning water chip here that they could use as their source of water? Or have they inhabited this place since before the nuclear war broke out? Also, this vault doesn't have a door. Why? Did they steal it? And if so, why would anyone steal the door, but not anything else inside the vault? Well, amongst many other things, the Fallout Bible has a timeline of events, and these are some of the events that have to do with Vault 12. October 23, 2077, the Great War. Bombs are launched. Who struck first is unknown, and it is not even known if the bombs came from China or America. Air raid sirens sound, but very few people go into vaults thinking it is a false alarm. The vaults are sealed. October 23, 2077. Necropolis Vault, Vault 12, never closes. Once it becomes known that the other vaults have sealed, people within Bakersfield attempt to force their way into Vault 12 to protect themselves and their families. The Fallout Bible also has information regarding the purpose of each of these vaults, and this is what it says about Vault 12. In order to study the effects of radiation on the selected population, the vault door was designed not to close. This is the Necropolis Vault, and the ghouls were the result. The Fallout Bible consists of many volumes that were published as a series of updates in the year 2002, and Good Old Games has compiled them as a single document that you can download from the link that I'll leave in the description section down below. And one thing that I like about this way of rounding up the game's lore is that the game does not force feed you everything it wishes you to know through dialogue lines or information dumps, and I totally approve of this. The world of Fallout, more than any other world in any other game that we've reviewed so far on the channel, feels like a world that has been around long before you came into the picture, and it spreads far beyond the part of the world you get to see while you play the game. Many games are known for having extensive lore, places, races, conflicts that end in war, and so on and so forth. But I've often felt like many of these game worlds are like oceans that spread far and wide, but only have 1 centimeter of depth. But in Fallout, painstaking efforts have been taken to make everything in the game world feel like the product of veritable human dynamics. Take the history of the bottle caps that are used as currency in Fallout. This is what the wiki says. Durable, portable, and instantly recognizable, bottle caps, predominantly from Nuka-Cola, rapidly became one of the most common currencies accepted by traders in post-war North America, in line with speculation by Dr. Mobius about the role they might play in post-war economies. The earliest known adoption of bottle caps as currency took place in New California. Within 10 years of the hub's founding in 2093, caps became the standard currency of the Wasteland. The widespread use by hub merchants leading to the nickname Hub Bucks, Bucks, Hub Script, or just Script. The hub merchants selected bottle caps because of 2 factors. First, the technology to manufacture them and paint their surfaces had been mostly lost in the Great War, which limited any counterfeiting efforts. The paint used, machining, and metal type all have to be very specific in order for a bottle cap to be genuine. Second, there is a limited number of bottle caps, which preserves their value against inflation to some degree. Finally, the hub merchants in New California could support it as a common unit of exchange by backing it with water. And you could say this little passage is awesome because it explains thoroughly how bottle caps became the currency in post-war USA. They even mention the tangible good that backs it up. But what I find fascinating is that they mention the various nicknames the currency has. See, every country that I know of has a nickname for its currency. For whatever reason, this is something that we humans do. In the US, for example, they call dollars bucks. In Britain, pounds are often referred to as quids, and Spain's former currency, the peseta, is commonly called pelas. And I think that because the creator of Fallout's world were so thorough in the verisimilitude of their creation, you can see passages like this in the world's timeline as described in the Fallout Bible. 2053, the socially transmitted new plague arises, killing tens of thousands. The United States closes its borders and the first ever national quarantine is declared. The source of the plague is unknown, but rumors persist that it is a genetically engineered weapon.
No way!
Does that sound familiar? 2059, the artificial intelligence is born. Limited by memory constraints, its expansion is rapidly halted. The discovery paves the way for future AI research in laboratories throughout the United States.
No way!
September 15, 2073. As China becomes increasingly aggressive with their use of biological weapons, you know what? I think this is the time to say I rest my case. But these documents were written in the year 2002, and if some of the stuff you just heard sounds surprisingly familiar, it's not because these guys had extrasensorial powers or because they were time travelers, I think, but because everything they came up with was grounded on verisimilitude. And that is why some of the things that are described in the Bible, the Fallout Bible that is, sound strangely familiar to some of us in this day and age. As for the story itself, like we said, it's not much to write home about. If anything, it's an excuse to put you through the various tests of a post-apocalyptic world. It's like one big chain of quid pro quos, and some of those exchanges will require you to do some pretty dishonorable things. The best part of the experience is thinking about how different your decisions would have been under different circumstances, or if any of these decisions had been thrusted upon you in real life. And then there is of course the fact that, as simple as this story is, it is the story of how your actions shaped the future of the West Coast of America, particularly California in this game. And believe me, you can shape it in many ways, with just about every decision you make in the game. A game that was published in 1997. The story itself won't win any awards, but it holds its own weight. You are given a mission that is crucial to the survival of the people of your vault, and you have a limited time to complete it. That's an efficient way to add gravitas and stakes to your primary goal, and it'll probably make you take a no bullshit approach to the situation. And while you're out there being a man on a mission, a greater threat will reveal itself. This new threat is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty much revealed to you in an on-the-nose way, but it does have interesting implications. First of all, it's big. Like everyone will be turned into a monster with or without consent kinda big. Second, people are doing jack shit about it because they have other things to worry about or because they have no clue about what's really going on under their noses. My main gripe with the story is that the idea that people are going to pay dearly for not doing anything about the big threat looming in the horizon because they are worried about pettier problems is not nailed down properly. In Dragon Age Origins, there's this passage.
I would like to know what you intend to accomplish, Father. Should we not be fighting the Darkspawn instead of each other?
The nobility should be brought into line and then the Darkspawn defeated. This is no true blight, Honora. Only Kaelin's vanity demanded it be so.
Beg pardon, sir, but blight.
And to this passage.
Word is spreading that the surface may suffer a blight. It is shameful we are not in a better position to help. That may be, and that is a terrible risk for the surface. But even if the world would end tomorrow, Lord Harrowmont cannot ignore Balin today.
In Mass Effect, there's this passage.
Saren wasn't the one commanding the Geth. It was the Reaper Sovereign.
Ah yes, Reapers. The immortal race of sentient starships allegedly waiting in dark space. We have dismissed that claim.
In Game of Thrones, you have this passage.
Your Grace, everyone you know will die before winter's over if we don't defeat the enemy to the north.
As far as I can see, you are the enemy to the north.
I am not your enemy. The dead are the enemy.
The dead? Is that another figure of speech?
The army of the dead is on the march.
The army of the dead.
And they are all good examples that go to show that some of the important players don't see the big threat with the same urgency as the protagonist does, because they have not come face to face with the big threat several times like the protagonist has. I mean, as the Grey Warden or Commander Shepard, you know the shit's about to hit the fan. And you can feel the frustration in those games as you try again and again to convince everyone that they should drop whatever they're doing to address the real threat. In Fallout, you are asked to look into the threat of the super mutants by several people, but when you come back to report to them, they're all like, oh, so that's happening, well, good to know. In the best of cases, they say, oh, this is really bad. Now, go and do something about it, and I can't do anything to help you, and that's it. And to be honest, the first time I played the game, I didn't even notice this, because I really didn't have too many games to compare Fallout's story with. But much rain has fallen since, and revisiting this game after 20 years of awesome storytelling in video games is not that easy. One thing I'd like to mention though is the way in which the game adds levity to its otherwise very grim premise. You get tiny snippets of cheap lols like a Brahmin saying moo, moo moo, and then as though he wanted to emphasize his point, moo I say. But you also get clever bits of humor that are in line with the game's or even the IP's general tone. See, the world in Fallout fell apart with the Great War, but people still carry on with their lives, doing what they can with what little they've got. Regular people in the world of Fallout are down to earth because reality demands it, but most are not hopeless about the future, and some are even enthusiastic about the few things they can do in a way that is almost contagious. Harold, for example, is a character that makes an appearance in various Fallout games, and despite everything he's been through, he keeps a positive and cheerful outlook, and he tries to help others however he can.
Hello there. Haven't seen a human around here in a good long while. Not alive, anyway. The name's Harold. What can I help you with today?
This is what the Fallout Bible says about him. Harold joined the ghouls in Fallout 2 because he's a kindly sort who likes to help people. When he sees a group of people trying to make their way in the Wasteland, he tries to step in and give them a leg up, especially when it can benefit life for everyone. Wherever a key event in Fallout has occurred, Harold always seems to be right there in the middle of things, helping to push the world along and make it a better place. His wit is a little dry and raspy, but he's got a good heart. And I think this guy embodies the spirit of Fallout. and the game's humor is 100% in tune with this spirit. It's never over the top in a way that downplays the severity of the situation, but it does make fun of tragedy in a way that almost seems like a collective coping mechanism to help people through. And the best part of it is that it is not afraid to make fun of the player, and this is something that we have definitely lost these days. I'm having a hard time remembering a game that reached out to me in a fourth wall breaking way to mock me for being dumb, like Leisure Suit Larry or Space Quest used to do a lifetime ago. So to wrap things up, I'll say that the story in Fallout is not the best story ever written. At times it feels like a product of its time, dated even at others. But make no mistake about this, the story, and most especially the lore in this game, its several endings, and especially all the delicious character agency trademark of the Fallout IP, still pack a punch more than 25 years later, and they are well worth the price of the admission. Companions Lorewise. Secondary mechanics and user experience.
What the fuck? No. You can't cheese your way out of this one as if it were the combat in Arcanum.
Fine, okay, Companions Lorewise. They suck. There's no way to candy coat this. I know there must be a CRPG out there that takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting that has good companions with which you can share your adventures, but that game unfortunately is not Fallout. It's also not Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, Encased, Wasteland 2, Wasteland 3, etc. Companions in this game are as bad as companions get. They don't have interesting backgrounds, their reasons to join your party are as generic as they can be, they have almost nothing to say about anything you do, they don't ever participate in any conversation, and they only have a handful of dialogue lines that don't open up new dialogue lines. They truly are the worst companions I have had. And
well, this game is from 1997.
Is not an excuse, because there were many RPGs back in the day that came out before Fallout that had some really good companions, like Chrono Trigger or Breath of Fire 2. Also consider that Planescape Torment, and therefore Morten Dagon, came out only a couple of years later, and those are some of the best companions there have ever been in a video game, so yeah, there's no excuses for this. Companions gameplay-wise. Your companions are also terrible in this respect. You have no control over their actions, you cannot equip them with gear, and they take some of the most idiotic decisions imaginable in combat. Fallout may very well be the reason why I feel these post-apocalyptic themed games should be solo adventures. Secondary mechanics and user experience. Secondary mechanics in Fallout are surprisingly robust. In fact, I think they are pure genius. Reading magazines to improve your skills? That's sheer brilliance. Whoever invented that deserves a statue, in my opinion. See, they could have made this mechanic a perk that you could get every X number of levels. But reading magazines is way more immersive, and the fact that some of these magazines are very expensive and some others you can only get from some NPCs if you agree to help them, or from some remote containers in places that are hard to access, gives you a proper feeling of accomplishment that you just wouldn't get from simply leveling. You could have also gotten better at skills like repairing or science by performing related actions again and again like you do in some other games. But that almost inevitably results in you sneaking when you don't need to sneak, jumping when you don't need to jump, or running when you don't need to run, just to increase these skills. And that's just awfully distracting in my opinion. There is also trading in Fallout, and like everything else in the game, it feels adequately post-apocalyptic in the sense that the good stuff, the stuff that gives you an edge, is extremely hard to find or extremely expensive. Some consumables you can only buy once from vendors, and some vendors will only make their stock affordable if you help them with something hard.
I got news for you.
You also have a lot of ad hoc secondary mechanics that you must figure out if you want to get through some of the game's more Sierra-like challenges. There are also ways to improve some of your weapons if you are in good standing with a certain NPC, and also ways to improve your stats, but I won't be spoiling how to do these things. As for the user experience, I was a little bit weary going back to Fallout after so many years, because I don't remember feeling like the UX sucked in that game at the time. But when you revisit the classics, that is always a fear. And well, yes, there are a couple of things that feel dated without question. Trading is a little bit tedious, but that's because bartering is a thing in this game. and that adds a little bit of complexity and therefore complication. You also have to scroll a lot back and forth, and dragging and dropping things is perhaps a little bit more complicated than it needed to be. And the same thing goes for choosing an item in your inventory and using it, especially if you have to use it on some other item or on something that's not on your inventory. There's a bit of a learning curve to all of this, and even after you've mastered it, it will still give you some trouble, I bet, from time to time. The fact that we never saw this type of interfacing in a game ever again after the first 2 Fallout games should tell you all you need to know. Combat may not be intuitive to newcomers, and there may be a little bit of a learning curve to it, but once you've mastered it, you'll see the UX in that aspect of the game is exactly what it needed to be for the game design they were going for. Yes, clicking to move about is sometimes inconsistent, especially if you click too far away from your character's current location, and panning the area map is a little bit clunky, but this is to be expected in a game from 1997. These 2 aspects of the game score quite differently in my opinion, so this is the score I'm giving them on average. Sound effects and mix. Dude, this game wasn't fucking around with the sound. This was leagues ahead of its time back in the day, and let me tell you something, sounds in modern day successors of Fallout like Encased or Underrail lack all the oomph in the world compared to this. This sounds badass, to be honest. The sound of you blowing someone's leg to pieces with your submachine gun, or crushing that rat scorpion with your electric truncheon. Nothing was even remotely this badass back in the day. And if I'm honest with you, only a handful of CRPGs these days have the capacity to make me say, whew, with a proper combination of well-timed sound snippets and bloody animations. And I let out a couple of those whew here and there while I was revisiting this game. And the rest of the sonic landscape is nothing to scoff at. Doors have some proper sci-fi sounds to them, there's ambient sounds that add to the immersion aspect of the game, and the sound mix is consistently solid. The sound mix in games like Icewind Dale 2 is amateurish in comparison, with all the clipping and volume issues. You have some of those here for sure, but it's almost impeccable compared to anything that was out there at the time. Overall, very impressive. Music. Music in this game is a masterclass on how to do music for video games. Is it great as a standalone soundtrack? Hell no, of course not. Does it nail the vibe of the game? Yes, but not for the same reasons as the soundtrack in, say, Stellaris, which I am listening to like mad lately. The soundtrack in that game sounds like a full cast of professional musicians performing a piece by a composer who knows his space sci-fi, and that is great, of course, but the music in Fallout consists of arrangements and sounds that barely even count as music. They feel like part of the game's eerie sonic landscape, like sounds that may very well come from your character's surroundings, and this adds to the immersion aspect of the game like you wouldn't believe, and it also adds a touch of horror and claustrophobia to the experience. Overall, while this is not worth listening to while you're working or jogging or driving around the city, it's the perfect soundtrack for this type of game. Voice acting.
No, just another stupid rumor. Yeah, fire away. Well, you see, there's 4 of them. And that's about all they can ever agree on. They can't even agree if they want to piss, much less pick a pot to piss in.
Hello, my brother. May I be of service this glorious day?
I record the knowledge of our ancestors for future generations. Yes, I guess you could say I know stuff. What can I help you with?
It's not great, or terrible. The game is partially voiced, which is something that I've never been a fan of, and some characters are really good, while some others sound like the actors were merely reading out their parts with some intonation. Now, without spoiling anything, they definitely saved the best for last. Man, that guy, or whatever it was creepy as fuck. The voice acting for the final boss of the game deserves the highest score for sure. But there's other people talking in this game, and this is the score I'm giving everyone on average. Graphics. The art direction in this game is something else. This is the quintessential post-apocalyptic video game for a reason, and graphics are a big part of that reason. The world in Fallout truly feels like the embers of a modern world, ravaged by war, beset by hunger, and the various locations in this world, as different as they are from each other, they all paint the picture of a decrepit, broken world, from the haphazardly piled up cars that form the walls of Junktown, to the underground bunkers of the Brotherhood of Steel, to the necropolis that has been left to its fate, to the theaters and cinemas that have long forgotten their purpose. This is a world in which the least fortunate have been changed forever, for the worse, while some of the more fortunate ones try to impose their new world order to others or hole up in their strongholds waiting for the right time to emerge. Also, I can't end this section without mentioning the animations in this game. I find it quite impressive that there's an animation for everything in this game, going down a manhole, switching weapons, climbing, and because immersion is the name of the game in Fallout, there are little animated treats, like your character doing the cowboy holstering move, or reloading his weapon when he's just standing around, or tapping his crowbar in a menacing way, or the super mutants scratching their asses and then smelling their fingers. This speaks volumes of the attention to detail in this game, and there's also different animations for punches, kicks, different melee weapon attacks, and different firearms. Hell, many modern games could learn a thing or two from this old chap. Weapons, items, and character models are also on point, and they have this adequate Mad Max 2 kind of look and feel that just seems like the right fit. I think graphics in this game, at least on the artistic end of things, have aged like fine wine, and they are still every bit as exciting as they were more than 20 years ago, which is only proof of just how ahead of its time this game was. Performance and stability. This game is still damn near perfect more than 20 years later. Now, I didn't know where else to mention this, but to me this is an important issue. A very important issue. See, if you buy the game from Good Old Games or Steam, you are going to be getting the censored version, not the game that we played more than 20 years ago, with maybe an optional high-resolution patch, which is what I think we should have gotten. But nope, in this version of the game they have removed children NPCs, they have changed the word drug for chem, they have modified or removed any content that has to do with drugs, and, well, I am not going to go into the specifics of why I find this unacceptable. That all by itself could be another 1 hour long video. But if you want to play the game more than you want to boycott this version, you should know there is a patch that restores the game to its original glory, and I'll leave a link to it in the description section down below. You should apply the patch before you start playing the game, and I know for sure that it works with a Good Old Games version of the game, but I don't know if it works with a Steam version. Maybe the Actually crowd will hopefully say something about it in the comment section. As for bugs and glitches, frame rate drops, and all the other stuff that I usually talk about in this section, the game crashed only once, and it did happen in the worst possible moment, but other than that, I didn't experience any issues, or at least none that I can remember. Like I said, damn near perfect. Other considerations and final thoughts. Gaming has come a long way in the last 25 years. There have been major improvements in every aspect you can think of. User experience, sound effects and mix, and even aspects that have to do with the artistic end of things. They have evolved in ways that are almost unbelievable. And sometimes you only come to realize this when you pick one of your favorite classics and give it a spin after more than 20 years. And yes, in some respects, Fallout is a painful reminder of this. But unfortunately, we have also lost a lot in this process. And maybe it is an inevitable trade-off. but I can't help but feel that much of what has become lost to us was a key component, a pillar if you will, of what made games awesome in the past. Choice and consequence, opportunity cost, having to figure out not only the whats, but the wheres, the whys, and the hows in a game. Hell, even just now we're talking about not being able to play the game the way it was meant to unless you apply some fan-made patch. And Fallout stands as one of many glorious reminders of the great things we had in the good old days, beyond any nostalgia value that we might have attached to it. And as such, I just can't recommend it enough to anyone who is into RPGs or gaming in general. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like what you are seeing on this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Share the video, but most importantly, never stop gaming, but don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.